SpiderMan takes a dump in a coffee can. Yes, that's probably the best angry video game nerd song of all time, maybe second to the Ikari Warrior song, Where Did the Hair Go? But yes, Spider-Man is a big deal right now. Everyone is talking about Spider-Man. It's an upcoming PS4 exclusive and a game that I've actually really been looking forward to. I'm a fan of Spider-Man games. I'm not big on Spider-Man movies and superhero movies in general, but Spider-Man 2 on the GameCube is one of my favorite GameCube games of all time. It was a fantastic multi-platform release, and I really enjoyed that game. It was so much fun swinging around New York City playing as Spider-Man, and Spider-Man on the PS4 kind of reminds me of that GameCube game, Spider-Man 2, so I've had my eye on it. Everything I've seen from the game looks really cool, so I've been looking forward to getting my hands on this game. Now, I did not get a review copy of this game, but many people did, and some people even were able to go to their local mom and pop shops and get the game early. And instead of actually talking about the game itself, is the game good, how much content is in the game, people are talking about Spider-Man for one thing right now, and that is a supposed graphical downgrade in the graphics based on what we saw from E3 to what is in the final product. And this picture has been making the rounds on the internet, and everyone's putting in their 2 cents about the subject, and I thought to myself, you know what, it's time for me to put my 2 cents in on this subject, because we need to talk about the truth about the Spider-Man downgrade. Because is there a downgrade? Is this game being downgraded graphically from the E3 build? And what sort of precedent has been set in the past for this? Is this something new? Should people even be surprised? Is this even a big deal? So sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you're new, make sure you enter the Monster Hunter Nintendo Switch giveaway in the pinned comment section down below. And let's dive into the world of Spider-Man, graphical downgrades, and why honestly it's not a big deal.
Hey, RGT 85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my God, it's Stevie Richards!
So folks, in case you've been living under a rock, here's the picture in question, the picture that is driving the internet mad. On the right hand side, you of course see the E3 build of Spider-Man, and on the left hand side, you see the retail build of Spider-Man, and there are some things that will definitely jump out at you. When you just look at Spider-Man himself, he definitely looks different, maybe a bit softer, maybe a bit different colors, more generic colors, whereas on the right hand side of the screen, it sticks out a bit more. Spider-Man looks a bit more detailed. Of course, the biggest thing are the puddles of water. People are freaking out about these puddles of water because the puddles of water look way better on the right hand side than they do on the left hand side. Some of the textures, some of the lighting obviously looks better on the right hand side versus the left hand side, so you could definitely make a case if Spider-Man has been downgraded on the PS4 graphically. Now, what do I think of this? Do I think that basing it on the right hand picture to the left hand picture that there has been a graphical downgrade in Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4? Judging it based on this picture, absolutely. You would be silly to say that it wasn't anything. Even if it's a different time of day or something like this, the water simply looks better on the right hand side. Little details look better on the right hand side. Does that mean the left hand side, the final build of the game, looks bad? No, not at all. I think it still looks fantastic, but the right hand side obviously looks a little bit better. I think it's silly to sit here and try and argue that. I think the main point about this supposed downgrade is, where have you people been? Are you people new to the world of video games, the ones that are so outraged by this? Is this your first rodeo? Is this your first time in the world of video games? Because let me tell you guys something. This kind of shit has been happening forever. Games never look like how they are represented at E3. I want to go over a couple different games in this video, from what they were initially shown to the final product that have these graphical downgrades. And you know what? I know some people are going to be in the comment section saying, oh, this guy's a Sony fanboy, blah, blah, blah. If anything, people call me a Nintendo fanboy because I cover a lot of Switch stuff. But we're going to go over Microsoft, we're going to go over Sony, and we're going to go over Nintendo in the world of downgrades. So I want to just highlight some of these supposed downgrades and then let you guys know why these things tend to happen in the first place. The first game that I want to talk about is Aliens Colonial Marines. Now, you could simply look at the gameplay footage of this from the initial build to the final build and see that there has indeed been a pretty substantial graphical change in the game. The graphics definitely looked better in the initial build of the game from when it was showcased at E3, and it definitely does not look as good in the final product. Now, Aliens Colonial Marines obviously had bigger problems than just graphics. It had problems with the actual AI, and there's a funny story that goes along with this where it was just one simple piece of code that would have made the AI better in the game. But you sit here and you look at this footage and you say, okay, yes, there's definitely been some sort of downgrade when it comes comes to the graphics of this game. Next on the list is Watch Dogs. Do you remember Watch Dogs, people? Do you remember the Watch Dogs controversy? Obviously you don't, because if you did, you probably wouldn't be crapping about Spider-Man as hard as you are. The initial build that we saw at E3 definitely looks very different than the final build of the game, and there was lots of things involved in Watch Dogs that made it very different. Graphics aside, there was actually gameplay elements that were showcased in the initial build of the game that did not make it to the final build of the game. Watch Dogs was a game that had a bit of a downgrade in pretty much everything. Graphics aside, you could clearly see the graphics and look at this game and say, okay, they definitely changed the visual style of this. It does not look as polished, it does not look as clean, it does not look as crisp. The AI is probably different as well. But there was actual gameplay elements that did not make it into the final version of Watch Dogs. And you could just simply see that it definitely looks different from the first time it was unveiled at E3 to the final build of the product. Now let's hop into Microsoft. Let's take a little chomp at the old block of Microsoft. Let's start things off with Fable. You don't even have to talk about Fable's graphics. You just have to talk about the actual gameplay mechanics of Fable. All these crazy things that Peter Molyneux promised that were going to be in Fable and then ended up not being in Fable. And that's pretty much what gave Peter Molyneux a bad name in the world of video games. Moving along with Microsoft, let's look at the first time Sea of Thieves was unveiled to the final build of the game. Obviously, the initial impressions that we saw of Sea of Thieves, I wasn't too impressed with it, but I definitely think that graphical style looks better than what we saw in the final build of the game. It looks more detailed, more refined. It seems like there's more stuff going on than what we saw with the final build of Sea of Thieves. Moving along, let's talk some more Sony stuff. Killzone 2. If you don't remember Killzone 2, you're probably too young to be watching this video, because Killzone 2 was one of the most infamous downgrades on the PS3. Also make a case for Uncharted 4, looking at a screenshot of what they showed at E3 that was supposedly running on the PS4, and then what was the final product of the game. Now I know what you're saying to yourself, where's Nintendo? Why aren't you taking a shot at Nintendo? Let's take a shot at Nintendo. Let's start things off with Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Wii U. Now this was sort of harder to come across because there wasn't much information out there, but you could definitely see a lack of detail in the final product of Xenoblade Chronicles X versus what they showcased when they first showed off the game. You can find E3 trailers of Xenoblade Chronicles X as well that definitely show off a bit of a decrease in graphical fidelity, which was actually needed in that game because there was a ton of loading and pop-up that was involved in that game. That's why you had to download these huge texture packs. And finally, in the world of Nintendo, let's talk about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, people are going to be pissed off that I'm mentioning this game, and people are going to argue with me that this wasn't a downgrade. This was just what they showed off first. It wasn't indicative of the final product of the game. But when you announce a new game and you show some sort of footage of it, people are going to be like, okay, this is what the game is supposed to look like. And yes, it definitely doesn't look as detailed as it initially did in that first unveiling of the game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Was it a graphical downgrade? You could kind of make an argument either way. Yes, it was just a trailer that was supposed to be representative of the final product of the game, not necessarily indicative of the final product of the game, but to me, this is a downgrade. And folks, this is what I'm trying to say here. All of these aforementioned games did have a downgrade. Spider-Man probably does have some sort of a downgrade, but like I said, if you're sitting there watching E3 trailers every year expecting your final product to be indicative of what you are seeing at E3, you are sadly mistaken. A lot of these games that they showcase sometimes aren't even running natively on the hardware. They're running on PCs that are pretty much up to spec with the hardware, because that's how they design the games. They're not designing the games on the actual PlayStation 4, they're designing it on a PC, and they're trying to make it so that the PC has similar specs to the PlayStation 4. That's why downgrades happen, because it's pretty much just an estimation of what the system should be potentially able to do. If you're sitting there watching these E3 trailers year after year, expecting the final product to be indicative of what is being shown during E3, you're going to be sadly mistaken in the world of video games. It's just like any sort of advertisement. Look at a McDonald's commercial. You know how good those burgers look? And then when you actually go to a McDonald's and you get the burger, it looks nothing like that? That's what advertising is about. Do you think The Last of Us 2 is going to look as good as it did at E3 this year? No. I think if you do think it's going to look that good, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. You're setting yourself up for failure. I'm sure there are hundreds of more games that you could go through in the library and the history of games that have changed over time, that have gotten graphic downgrades. Sometimes you even see graphic upgrades, but most of the time you see graphical downgrades. If you look at the initial presentation, if you look at the initial trailer, if you look at previews of a game and expect it to be 100% indicative of the final product, that's just silly, because these are just previews of the game. screen. This is gameplay that is supposed to be representative of the game. It more than likely will look almost like this. And you know what? That Spider-Man stuff, it does look almost like the E3 footage. It's just not as good. But what I want to close this video with is how many people are actually going to notice the puddle situation when they are playing this game. How many people are going to be, you know, going out of their way to say, oh, this puddle doesn't look as good as this puddle, and this puddle's here isn't as pretty as it showed in the preview of the game. No, you're going to be actually playing the game. Yes, graphical downgrades suck, but they happen. They've always happened. It's been around since the beginning of video games. Previews are not necessarily 100% indicative of the final product. So stop worrying so much about the graphics. If they have been downgraded, that's fine. Maybe the game will still look fantastic. From what I've been told of people that have Spider-Man on the PS4, the game still looks absolutely beautiful. It even looks better in some sections than it did in initial previews. Stop worrying about graphics. Enjoy the game and play the game, because you know what? In the future, you will always see more stuff like this. There will always be graphical downgrades. There always have been graphical downgrades, and it's just the way the video game industry works. Let me know in the comments section down below what you think about this whole downgrade situation, and give me some instances of graphical downgrades or gameplay downgrades that you remember in the history of video gaming, because I just really scratched the tip of the iceberg here. There's been so many more downgrades in the history of video games. We could probably spend hours on this subject. And as always, thank you for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, make sure you enter that Monster Hunter giveaway, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.